I'm Lani and I will be discussing meningitis. Meningitis is basically a disease where the membranes around an individual's brain and spinal cord become inflamed, either through a bacterial infection, fungal infection, a virus. Parasitic meningitis is also a thing, as well as non-infectious meningitis. Some of the symptoms that present with this are fever, stiff neck, nausea, vomiting, confusion, and usually a severe headache as well. It's pretty crucial for healthcare professionals to determine the pathogen responsible when an individual becomes infected with meningitis, because there are different treatments that you have for each cause, as well as different levels of severity and urgency. For bacterial meningitis, this would be the most severe and urgent as well. You need to start antibiotics right away, because it is the most fatal and will quickly cause that fatality or severe brain damage as well. This problem exists in society around the world. There are vaccines for some forms of meningitis, or rather, some of the infections that will cause meningitis, but not all strains are covered with the vaccines available, so it's kind of just a disease that I would assume will continue to exist in society. This disease has not been eradicated. Clearly, it's still prevalent, especially in places like sub-Saharan Africa. I have a picture showing a map of Africa in a few slides, and it shows this line across the middle, which they call the meningitis belt. That's because people just live in such close quarters there, and this basically is a segue into the quick spread of disease. How did this happen? This happened over a long period of time. Bacteria and viruses develop and evolve over time to either become antibiotic resistant, and each strain that develops, we have to keep coming up with a new vaccine or a new medication that will ultimately kill or inhibit that bacteria. Where did this happen? So this happened in the early 16th century. This is the earliest recorded case where people were experiencing the signs and symptoms of meningitis. In Switzerland, around 1805, there were recorded 33 deaths of meningococcal disease, which is basically mirrors the same bacteria that causes meningitis. Pathologists were able to study that, take CSF from individuals that had these symptoms, and kind of just study the disease over time and how it was spreading and all that stuff. So today, meningitis occurs in almost every country, but it is most prevalent in Africa, like I discussed earlier. Here's the map in the upper right corner, showing the meningitis belt in sub-Saharan Africa. There's different strains in different countries. We did develop a vaccine that helps with preventing meningitis. However, there's just so many other strains that it's kind of impossible to fully contain. Because of Africa's lower socioeconomic status and not having the proper health care that they need, this disease just really takes over. The risks for the community in the future. The risk factors for meningitis include alcoholism, autoimmune disorders, infants that haven't had their immunity built up yet, children, adolescents, and young adults, mostly because they're in colleges, dorms, living in close proximity, which helps the spread of disease also. People with suppressed immune systems, it could be naturally through an autoimmune disorder, like I said, or it could be through medications like steroids, which suppress the immune system. Some of the etiological factors, there's predisposing factors like cysts, congenital inner ear malformations, congenital neural tube defects, brain tissue outside of the cranium, immunodeficiencies. These can all cause meningitis or there's also other chronic conditions, like the chronic perimeningeal infections, that will also harbor meningitis and lead to that. So there's not really a known strategy to solve this problem, but the recommendations of the CDC are the vaccinations, even though there's only 3 types of bacteria that it can protect against. But this does greatly reduce the risk of contracting meningitis. There's also a recommendation that pregnant women should get the Group B strep test so that they can receive prophylactic antibiotics during labor so that their babies do not receive Group B strep that can ultimately lead to meningitis. Vaccinations in other countries were also used where the disease was prevalent, although it's only used against a few strains. That still covers so many people and lowers that number exponentially of the people becoming infected with meningitis. Chemoprophylaxis is also a preventative measure used. This is basically taking antibiotics before an infection occurs. This will just prevent it. And in my opinion, early recognition is key. With that said, it's pretty crucial that the public is educated on the signs and symptoms of this disease. So the stiff neck, headache, confusion, all that stuff. I'm also a huge advocate for vaccines. It's super important. They save lives. It's important that people are educated and told the benefits of them, and that they know that there are boosters that will be needed. I believe for meningitis, it's every 3 years. Here are my references, and thank you so much.